Hi, I'm Mary Greendale, and welcome to Just Thinking. So today we're going to have a quarterly update from our state representative, James Arena-DeRosa, and James is in the office. It's not an office, in the studio with me. Hi, James. How are you?
Hello, Mary. Happy to be here.
And how has summer been for you? Good?
It's been good. It's been busy. I'm still trying to stay connected to the district. Haven't gone away because I'm still in my learning curve, but I'm enjoying it.
It is your first year, and the first year is like, stepping on the accelerator. So all in all, are you happy being a state legislator?
I am. I'm really enjoying it. And we were talking a little beforehand. It's different. I had executive roles at Peace Corps and at USDA with Obama, and that was great. But you had to kind of stay in your lane around the issues that you were responsible for. In the legislature, you get to work on a little of everything, and it's a lot about collaboration and working with others, and that's kind of my nature, and so I really enjoy that. But I have a long way to go. I'm still kind of weaving my way through learning the personalities and the issues and the politics. But so far, so good, and I am enjoying it a lot.
That's good. I really do think that's the most important thing. I can't imagine doing that job if you really didn't like it. If you found out you got in there and it's like, oh, yikes, I don't like doing this.
Well, it's like everything, right? Here I am in my point in my career. I'm still working more hours than my kids, but I love it, so it's okay. And
Yeah.
it's, find something that you love. I say that to them all the time. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So give me your sort of thumbnail sketch of the whole year. In general. Busy year, get much done. What do you think of the high points? What's the takeaway?
Yeah, so ask me that question each quarter when we get together, because there were times when I thought things are happening really fast and quickly, and then other times where I was anxious, like, I feel like we should be doing more. There's an ebb and flow, and I'm still learning that. The budget, and I know we wanted to talk a little bit about what happened with the budget and why was it late this year. And one of the things I learned, of course, is first time in 8 years we've had a new governor. So by protocol, you give the new governor an extra month. So our whole schedule was pushed back. Our initial meetings, our meetings with Ways and Means, our deliberations, our hearings, and so we finally passed most of the budget by the end of July. So even though it was late, it wasn't that far off, given that situation, and we'll talk a little bit later about some of the things that came out of it, which were really great and was kind of worth.
Why don't you just tell us
while
we're here?
So it's interesting, because I know people are like, wow, the budget hasn't passed yet, but it was worth the wait, because as we got to conference, there were some significant differences between the House and the Senate in terms of what we wanted. One of the biggest things that we wanted on the House side is we were fighting for universal school meals. Lots of reasons why. I can talk about why that's important for kids. I remember this from USDA. Kids in a classroom can't learn if they're hungry. Every town, including Holliston and Hopkinton, the towns I represent, have children that are eligible for school meals, but sometimes it's a little harder to kind of go to the front of the line if you're the one that needs help. Now everyone will get meals every day. But also, as I remind parents, how many times did our kids run out of the house? You forgot your lunch money, or someone had to run up to the school and bring them lunch. I mean, it's good for all of them. They're all going to learn. And if you're a parent, for every child in school, it's going to save you $1,200 a year. And the federal government's going to pick up a fair amount of that as we move to universal school meals. But that wasn't in the Senate side as we went into conference. It was in our House side. And the Senate had some things that they thought were really important. I know Senator Spilka and others were pushing for community college free tuition, which is a big thing for the state. Here we are in the state, we are desperate for some occupations in Massachusetts. I mean, if we stick around, Mary, who's going to be here to take care of us? Because we're short on healthcare workers, we're short on nurses. And it's going to be really important that we offer opportunities for training. So I think that's going to be a great thing that they felt really strongly about it. I think there were some mental health pieces in there as well. So part of compromising and coming up with a final budget, those deliberations take time. But I think we ended up in good space. I was pleased what we did around Chapter 70 and local aid. Some of those numbers are good. Still a little frustrated around special ed, and we can get into those details and how the state deals with it, not the concept.
Right.
It's really important that every child gets the education that it needs. But one of my quick learnings, and I don't know how, I can keep talking, but we need to figure out how the small towns fit in with the state. When I ran, I said if I could do one thing, it would be to help make sure that the voices of the small town are heard at the State House. And there are all these caucuses. You know, and some of them are identity, Black Caucus, Latino. Some of them are around issues, the environment, rivers. Some of them are around politics, you know,
Or geography.
Geography. Well, but there aren't some geography, but not. There's no caucus for the small towns and the suburban towns, and there are a lot of us.
Wherever they are, you mean?
Wherever they are.
So we have the Metro West kind of
Well,
thing.
yeah. I mean, there's some of those small, very regional groups that get together and talk about issues. But we have common cause with so many small towns all across the Commonwealth.
True.
And I might meet with them on specific issues as they come up, but we don't get together regularly. And I'm going to actually start working on, maybe we need to think about having a voice collectively, especially around unfunded mandates.
Yeah.
And it crunches the small towns. And let's, since I mentioned special ed, let me stick with it, because it kind of hurts the small towns around here. At the end of the Baker administration, they agreed to give a 14% increase for out-of-placement, for district out-of-placements. They hadn't been given a big raise for a long time. It used to be 1-2% a year. I'm not against the concept of taking care of them, but it shouldn't have been done all at once. Because then I had school committee members calling me before I even got into office about whether or not I could help them with that, and we started working on it. And so we talked a little bit about what we could do, and the problem is school committee budgets are getting blown out. And what happens to small towns? If you're good at special ed, you attract more. And
That's right.
I've had parents literally, and they were honest, they said, James, we picked some of your towns because they're so good about special ed. So what does the state do? Instead of rewarding that good behavior, it punishes you. You have to pay even more. Rather than saying, isn't it good that you're accommodating these kids? We're going to cover that bill. We cover it, some of it. It's 75% above a certain amount, and after a multiplier of 3, it's a little complicated the way it all works. But the state should do more. The state should say, this is a collective interest that we have as a state.
Yeah.
And how does it hurt the small towns? We're not like Boston. We don't have whole groups of teachers where we can move people around. Sometimes at the last minute, somebody will move into a town, and a small town has to scramble to cover that because small towns don't have the wherewithal. They don't have huge divisions set up to deal with it. And that happens with a lot of issues, and a couple others that I'm working on that we can get to as well. But that's just one example.
So just fundamentally, let's talk about the fact that the Senate it seems to have worked out for this budget, but the Senate is typically more liberal than the House is, and that's not new. I mean, I think that's sort of been as long as I can remember.
Yeah.
It seems a little bit more so right now, but that's okay. We won't debate the finer points. But what are the results of that? How does that interfere or help?
You know, it's interesting, and I'm still learning. But I would agree with your observation, but it's changing. My class has 24 members, which is a lot. And we're all over the state, very diverse class, different backgrounds. 20 of us are in the Progressive Caucus. That's a lot. Right now, 60 of the Democrats that are in the Democratic Caucus, which is around 120, are in the Progressive Caucus.
Really?
But I don't think at the moment we punch at that weight, if you will. I think we're still trying to figure out how to appropriately work within the system. Here's why. Before my time, maybe 6 to 8 years ago, some people came in with an agenda, but they hadn't worked in local government, they hadn't been around, they hadn't had to work collaboratively, they were ideologues. And they kind of went too far on their own, rather than how do we collaborate, how do we work together, how do we get things done? And I think I've told you before, my politics, I'm on social justice issues, I lean progressive, but I'm very pragmatic on economic issues, and I want to accomplish things and move our communities forward. To do that, everybody's got to work together a little bit. So I think that one of the things that we're trying to figure out is, how do we take that voice, not in some kind of revolution against leadership, but how do we use that voice to have an impact on the issues that we care about? The interesting thing is, for that caucus, our #1 issue was universal school meals. Now, the speaker's a former teacher, certainly was empathetic and understood. The chair was headlining, the chair, Michaelowitz of Ways and Means, was headlining some of the events for universal school meals. They were very supportive of that. So I think we're going to see some changes over time. Where it will be interesting if issues around transparency and openness and some of that stuff comes to the fore. I was reminded of this. I've had some local meetings. We'll talk about my committees and some open forums that I've had in different towns. But I was doing one with the local business community because I'm on the small business committee, and I wanted to reach out and listen and learn from small business. And I invited all the select board every time I've done one. And then a couple of them called, well, more than one of us wants to go. We now have to post a meeting. And I was reminded that local government has more restrictions around open meeting process
Than you do.
than I do, which kind of doesn't make sense. But I think if we're going to get any of these changes, it has to be done collectively all at the same time. I don't think you're going to get one chamber going on. I mean, why should they? You know, people got a little annoyed that the Senate got rid of their term limits for their president. I understand why. Why should their chamber have term limits and not the governor, not the speaker, not the treasurer, the secretary? You know, if we're going to do any of that stuff, it's got to be done collectively. We've got to all be in this together. I don't think any chamber's going. I'm not going to go against my leadership. Why would I? I mean, that's not fair. If we're going to all do it together, well, then we can have. I'm open to that conversation. So I think you'll see some more pushes from the Senate on some of that stuff in the years ahead. But it's interesting. We've got our membership is evolving and changing, and you know, it's almost 40 new members in the last 6 years. So I think it's going to keep changing.
It starts to make a difference, but it's not fast. It's not fast. So what committees are you on again? Remind us.
Sure. So, and I was really happy with the committees that I was assigned to, and you know, we all got to put in some of our preferences. So I'm on public health, which is one of the largest committees, and of course, coming out of the pandemic is a very challenging time, and also on emergency response, because I'd done some of that work. And part of my work has been connected to investments in health and how we deal things. I mean, I'm enjoying that work, but one of my quick observations, no surprise, is, you know, our whole healthcare system is not focused on prevention and long-term. It's all about healing somebody when they get sick. It's kind of backwards from the way it should be. And you know, it was interesting that, and we know there's historic inequities in the way we have dealt with certain populations. Something came out more recently that emergency room visits are higher for people of color. And you might look at that and say, oh, well, that's good. At least they're getting seen at the emergency room. But what it means is they're not getting seen by their primary care. They're not getting good preventive health, nutrition. All those things that are embedded in long-term health inequities are affecting them. But our healthcare system needs a lot of work. Needs a lot of work. So that's one of them.
Public health.
Public health. I'm also on the small business, which I'm really enjoying it. And well, I won't go into a long. We can talk later about them. Completely different world from corporate America.
Yes.
And I remind people all the time, you know, they are the backbone of the local economy. And I really am enjoying starting to work with them. I've already sort of flagged some issues that I'm like, well, that's not fair, and we need to change some things, and we'll circle. Please, let's circle back.
That is a critical piece. Go ahead.
It's really important. And then I am on agriculture, and I care about food security and local food. It's going to become more and more important as we have issues with our with the environment, and sort of, you know, local food is so important, and it's healthier, it's better, it helps the local economy. It's interesting for us because we're not a corn state or a wheat state. You know, we have a great variety.
Very diversified.
Which is wonderful. But it gives us less weight in conversation.
Sure.
So all this, we finally did some disaster relief for what happened. I was really pleased that I talked with Senator Spilkin and also people on the Ag Committee and the House because of the flooding and some of the problems.
Horrible.
It was really, really bad. But all the FEMA rules, and I remember this from my time with the federal government, they're all set up for, you know, well, do you have 100,000 acres or multi-billion dollar?
Yeah.
That's not, we're in a different world. I've suggested that Massachusetts needs its own disaster fund because these things are going to keep happening. And what's interesting, one of my colleagues, Natalie Blake, she's been there a few years already had started thinking of that, and so we're going to work together and hopefully have something and maybe build that fund slowly over time so that when these things happen, we're not scrambling, can we find money to help these farmers that are going to lose their land, they're going to lose their business.
Those folks out in Deerfield that lost so much of their topsoils. I mean, unfortunately, I love them. I know the people.
Yeah.
But I mean, USDA used to have a poster that hung in the ladies' room. I don't know if it hung in the men's room, but it was a whole thing about all of the things in history that happened over the last 1,500 years. And in that period of time, we grew 1 inch of topsoil. That's how long it takes to get that 1 inch of fertile soil.
Wow.
And so when you hear about, you know, the farms in Deerfield where the entire hillside just went down into the Connecticut River, you're looking at a huge loss, not just a little loss. You never build that back up again. That's the bottom line. So it's like, learning what all of that is hard for legislators coming out of different kinds of environments, and then caring about it. You know, it's really hard. It's just competing interests constantly.
And to your point, We can do some things that'll help now, this year, but that's a long-term,
long-term
generational,
issue.
right? That's going to have
And
huge impact.
the other thing down the road, and I think that we'll see more and more of this because of the environmental issues, more and more of the growing will happen undercover. It will follow the cannabis world in terms of how it manages inside. And that's going to change a whole lot of dynamics, yet to come.
And we're seeing that. There's warehousing in parts of Canada, the Dutch. There's some big.
Yeah.
What's interesting is they had surpluses that helped some of the food banks. But I think you're right. I think there's going to be.
It has to go undercover because because the climate's been so tormented. So is that all your committees
And
before
then
we leave
emergency
that?
response.
Okay.
So which is interesting. So when we do COVID review, it's going to kind of it'll
public health.
match up with those, and then the disaster relief matches with agriculture. So.
And it matches with small business too, because there was nothing more disastrous than not having your customers be able to walk through the front door.
And I, I'm learning on that, and some of the ways that businesses that was very haphazard, the way the government approached it, rather than a cohesive.
They didn't approach it at all. It was just do whatever you can do, and here, there, otherwise. So let's go back to the underfunding of education for one thing, not back to, but let me talk about that briefly because it's sort of your special ed, but it's a little bit different.
Bigger, sure.
Is there any conversation even? I mean, I keep hoping that somebody's going to say, this is such a major component to every community.
That's right.
Look how much we spend.
We spend a lot, and it also is going to start pushing up against the character of the communities that we live in. We are taxing seniors out of our small towns.
Yeah.
I mean, I met so many people, during the campaign and now, who are like, James, I love this town, I want to stay here. My taxes are just getting too high. And we decided a long time ago in Massachusetts that we were going to fund most local government through tax. I mean, the state does some. The state's got to do more. It's going to be one of those things I'm going to have to learn over time. There has to be more conversation about it. I think it's one of those things that everybody cares about, but when it comes time to really funding, the whole thing with the millionaire's tax and the $1 billion that got passed, I think if you talk with people who supported it, and it was fairly close at the end, which was interesting considering there's only a small percentage of millionaires in Massachusetts, but that's okay. I think most people thought more money was going to go to K-12 education, and there were some things that were done out of that. But I thought there was going to be a little more of a boost from that, and so that was kind of an interesting just outcome of that.
There wasn't?
There was some. I mean, the school meals came out of that, but then there's some environmental money, and I'm not against the idea that we should be upgrading some of our buildings, but
that's not
that's
exactly. Not it.
I think that's a little that goes a little beyond the educational priority. And of course, some people were happy that we did that, but I thought that it should have been more focused on
education.
On education, right? Is it going to directly impact the outcome in the classroom? I could make an argument that school meals absolutely will. We know that it's been documented, and other things. And so I think that more help there. And one of the things that didn't get passed in the budget, just to jump back to special ed, there was supposed to be this $75 million increase that was going to happen. We had a supplemental. We passed it in the House, and then it never made it all the way through. Some towns, Millis started having layoffs. I had actually met with the chair of Ways and Means about some things, and he said, well, there are some towns that they're sitting on ESSER money. They're sitting on this money from ARPA still, and they were, and he was right. He said, so I don't just want to give money across the board. And I said, I understand that. I said, but then you've got towns that have spent every dollar. And, I get calls from Holliston and Hopkinton and Millis before I even started, like, this is really going to crunch us. Now, we're okay. I think we'll figure it out over time. But there's got to be a better way. I don't know what it is yet. And I think it gets a lot of discussion. But then when it's time to really fund it, I think we're way too reliant on local real estate taxes, and what's going to start to happen. Let's go back to the character of the towns. When I was coaching baseball here in Little League Baseball in Holliston, I look at the team and the coaches. There was a member of the fire department, someone who worked at the town hall, one of the police officers, teachers, right? It was a community, not all of them. I met with Chief Stone. We drove up to one of the events and we're talking. He says, James, he said, my young officers can't afford Holliston. I said, 2 out of 28 of my department now live in the town of Holliston.
Yeah, that's a big difference, and I've noticed that in doing the 300th history. It used to be everybody lived and worked here. We all knew one another, so it really was a community.
Yeah.
It's not that way anymore.
It's changing, and it doesn't have to be everybody, but it should. It's
should
nice
have
to
a choice.
Right. It should be critical mass. That's right. And then Go ahead.
When you go back to the education issue, I would respectfully suggest something to think
Sure,
about.
sure.
But what you've just defined in the package for the billionaire tax, separate education and infrastructure. It's kind of like the conversation we're having locally about having facilities management take over the repairs and maintenance and so forth of the buildings, and don't make those the school's responsibility, or at least let them they can have control of what gets done, but don't make them responsible for doing it. It's like when we used to make Leslie McConnell, who is the librarian, worry about the septic tank or the plumbing. It's like, why would you do that? Why would you pay a librarian to figure out the best way to get that done? You don't do that. You separate those needs.
That's interesting.
And it's just something to think about. We want to focus on what our students are getting. And at any rate, I want to hear about your meetings that you've been having with your little, I like them, what do you call them?
Roundtables.
Roundtables.
Or listening
I like that.
sessions.
Yeah, I like that. So you have had them with the small business groups around, or the small businesses in our little area. How are they going? What are you hearing?
We've had several. Let's start with small business. They've been great. We had great participation, wonderful community meetings. I really appreciate Travis Hearn joined me for the Holliston one, and he was going to stop by anyway. I said, Travis, so many issues that small businesses face. Some of them are state, some of them are federal, but a lot of them are local. And so he joined me, and it was kind of a joint forum because a lot of the questions were about local zoning or things that were happening that the town is in a better position to answer, and some of them were about the state as well. I really found them helpful. I don't have a lot of experience with small business. I did the accounting for my uncle, and I did some work for my brother-in-law on the farm and learned a little bit about government bureaucracy and what it's like to try to get grant money. It's, oh my goodness, it's very challenging. But I've already learned some things. One of them is any small businesses that are trying to work through the state contracting. It's just convoluted, very complicated. I mean, I heard that was one of the common themes in almost every town that I've talked to so far. And so what happens? Here we go again. So if you're a huge corporation,
you know how to do it.
And if you've got a staff person that's their job all the time, you're fine. But if you're a small business in Holliston or Sherburne where you've got a few people doing everything, they don't have time to chase. They throw their hand. They just don't have time. Maybe a little bit here and there.
No.
We don't think a lot about the end users when we set up those systems, and I think small business has to have more of a voice in that. The other thing that I'm going to try to work on this next session, we get into office, we have 5 days to file legislation. So I think more of my work, if I get reelected, will be next time. But one of the things that really bothers me about how small business, we know they got hurt by COVID, and some of it was we couldn't help, but some of it was the way we dealt with it. Here's an example. So the Baker administration made two $2 billion mistakes around unemployment. The first mistake was $2 billion was given to people in Massachusetts who should not have gotten unemployment benefits. Now, what the state decided was, if you were fraudulent, if you lied, they were going to go after you, right? As they should.
Sure.
But if you put in your paperwork thinking you were doing, I think I'm eligible for this, and the state said, yeah, you are, and then it found out, oh no, we made a mistake. The state said, we're going to indemnify you. I appreciate that. I respect that. I'm glad. I think that was a wise decision. What I don't like is then the state turned around and said, well, now what we're going to do is we're going to charge a surcharge to the business community on everybody to pay for the gap in the unemployment fund. It infuriates my sense of fairness, right? It's not fair. It's not right. That's the pragmatic side. That's just not right. Why do we do that? And by the way, why didn't we say, all right, you want to ask Walmart and Amazon for more money? Fine. But the first 50 employees are going to be exempt, so that Fisk and the super, whoever, they're going to at least be whole. There's a small business group that I work with, an individual small business in another town. Say, James, this is going to cost us $20,000 a year extra. Small family business, that's almost sometimes as close to your profit margin, right? It's a big chunk of it. It's unconscionable. I do not like that. Second $2 billion mistake that the Baker administration made. $2 billion, and this should have came out of the unemployment funds, but they took it from the wrong fund. And now the state's trying to decide how to deal with it. And we've had hearings on some of this stuff, and I'm the new guy, at least in the legislature, although I've been around for a bit. But I chimed in on a couple things, and the state's trying to decide how to deal with it. What I have said is, okay, that was supposed to come out of the unemployment fund. We need to build it back. But why don't we see how it goes? We have almost historic low unemployment right now. So why don't we wait? Let's not nickel and dime them with yet another surcharge. Why don't we see how it goes? Now, if unemployment stays low, we build the fund back over time. We're able to take care of people that need to go on unemployment. We're fine. If things don't go well and we hit 5 or 6% or whatever, all right, then maybe we are going to have to do a surcharge. But let's not do it now. So many businesses are still coming out of COVID. They're still trying to respond. It's just a, so we'll see. That the Healy administration is trying to get money from the federal government for some of that. And we'll see how it gets dealt with. But I just think we have to be smarter about the way we approach things. But the sessions have been great. I know here in Holliston, the hope is that we'll do the stroll again and kind of revive some things. COVID really undercut local business in so many ways.
Well, the difficulty with things like the stroll is that, the 2 or 3 people that were responsible for putting it together, they're tired. They're tired.
You need more than,
And
the same 12
it's just,
people. We used to say every committee has the same group of people. There needs to be more buy-in from some of the,
Well, some of the other merchants, the newer ones, the younger ones or whatever, really need to step up and say, this is a good idea.
It was like that with coaching, with Destination Imagination, with theater, parents, theater council.
It's always the same.
Often the same group. And
although you would think in a case of a business structure, that there would be some sort of, selfishness perhaps, but motivation anyway to get into it because and help because it does benefit your business.
And there are a few new, and maybe we'll see that, and maybe some of the older businesses can kind of guide, and some of the new ones can bring in some energy. And I told them I'm happy to help in any way that I can, but we'll see. But it's been good. But I think that we, part of my learning, and this is part of what I'm learning about the role of state government. One of my surprises is that people will call me sometimes on things that are out of my purview, and I'm like,
I think you know everything.
and I'm happy to help people navigate. I'm like, look, the U.S. mail is the responsibility of the federal government. I can call the postmaster. I've actually done that one time, and we got it resolved. But no, I don't have any leverage over the mail, and it's also, especially with local development, the ZBA in Holliston has a lot more power than I do in terms of whether or not development's going to come into this town. I can check on whether there should be a traffic study on a state road. I can see if it's ag land that's being used appropriately. Of course, I'm happy to help navigate that stuff. But so much of how a town decides to develop, a lot of it is informed by
But you
local.
see, they know your face, and they have a phone number or an email attached to it.
I hope we can put that as an underline on this.
Okay, we'll make sure that we put the graphics
I want people to email. If anybody has any questions about government, please call me as a one-stop. I mean, you can call me at the office. You can also email me at the office. Holliston Senior Center had a survey a couple years back. 40% of the people said, when they were asked, do you know who to contact if you need help with government, they weren't sure. And to me, that's a challenge to say, I want them to reach out to me.
That's exactly
and
true.
Navigate. And maybe I'll turn them over to town hall. Maybe I'll have them call the congressional office, or maybe we'll be able to deal with it directly, but I want them to call me. I don't expect them to know. We have to do a little better with civics in this country, but that's
and that's where I was kind of going. It's like, you talk about the ZBA, I challenge anybody in town that isn't intimately involved with government to name even one member of the ZBA to call, and so you're visible, you have an office, you have a phone number, and so people will call you.
And we want them to.
And that's great, but, I do think the civics piece is important, and I do think that local government can step up to be a little more visible too.
And I'm thrilled. Jeff Myers, Holliston High School graduate who graduated from UMass, is my legislative aide. Does a wonderful job. He's great, very responsive, and I think we're a good team so far. It's
good.
It's a big difference going from a few hundred staff to 2, but I like it. It's kind of intimate.
It's very different. There's just
it's a different world.
It's a whole different world.
But it's great. It's great.
You just got to like what you're doing. That's the bottom line. Have we missed anything? Is there something that let's just make sure we've covered all this stuff?
There's one thing I'd like to touch on because it's so big for the state, and these are, well, first of all, I also had roundtables with veterans, and I'm going to have roundtables with seniors. With the veterans, what I've learned is depending what branch you came out of, you get different guidance when you do it. So I've already contacted Santiago, the Veterans Administration, to say, gee, maybe the state can help navigate as they come out, like we did at Peace Corps, close of service, or here are all your benefits, here's what you're entitled to. The veteran servants agents are great, but it almost depends on the vagary of which branch you were in as to whether you're on your own or do you have support. So I think we could help a little bit with that. The seniors we haven't done yet, we're going to do that in the fall. But I wanted to touch on housing, if I can, for 2 minutes.
Sure.
It is a huge problem in the state. It's going to require a comprehensive solution. But here's one of the areas that I'm kind of frustrated where a well-intentioned rule has kind of led us astray. And I'll give you an example. I'm getting calls from housing authorities, and I'm going to meet with all of them. I've talked with them already. A few years back, the state decided that we were going to go to a statewide system to place housing. Now, let me just be clear. Do I want public housing to be available to everyone and all? Absolutely. I think that's a good operating tenet for us to say, we want our housing to be open to everyone. That's a good thing. What that unfortunately left out is human nature and the way people are. When my grandmother went into public housing, we had a hard enough time getting her to move down the street a half a mile because I want to be near my family, my friends, and it worked out great, and she got to know a whole new group of people, and she was still close to all of us. It worked out great. What we're seeing now is, and I'll give you a couple specific examples. I was talking with the Housing Authority in Hopkinton. They said, James, we were trying to place this person. Local housing authorities no longer have any control or purview. So they were trying to help somebody get a space, and they were trying to get them through the process, the applications, all this convoluted stuff. Finally, we found you a place. She gets a call. We have a place for you in Lowell. Nothing against Lowell. She's like, I'm not going to Lowell. My family's here. My community's here. My relatives are here.
It's more expensive for the state to put you in Lowell because there's no support system for you.
There's no support system. And so Millis, and we're going to sit down and meet, and this is criminal. It's not their fault. They have units that have been open for months because of the way the rules work. They had 100 applications. They only got 12 back because people are like, oh, Millis. Right? I'm not going to move 2 hours. It would be like you were in Holliston. Oh, we have a place for you in Pittsfield. We have a place for you in Greenfield. Now, if somebody wants to, fantastic. Great, no problem. So can't we, and I already have meetings lined up where I'm going to talk, can't we come up with a system that says, all right, yes, we want to be welcoming. Of course, diverse Holliston, great people. I said, it's hard to be welcoming when the entry fee for Holliston is $750,000. You just eliminated 99% of the population. But I get the concept. Of course, I want us to be welcoming. So let's have a system that says our public housing is open to everybody. But at the same time, we're going to let each local housing authority set aside 50% of the units, 25, whatever, to the extent that they've got local residents who've lived in town, veterans. They have all these great ideas. And then we can look at it, get some experience around it. And maybe in a few years we'll say, oh, wait a minute, now it's oversubscribed and we're not being open enough. Or, gee, we still aren't filling housing units. We got to give, I don't know what the answer is, but let's try it. And maybe it's different for different communities. We're an hour from Boston. We don't have the greatest, if you have a car,
you're fine.
You're fine. The T is great. But if you don't have a car, it's not great. So I can imagine somebody alone saying, well, geez, where are my local markets, my friends, my relatives? I can't get around by public transportation. So a lot of them are turning it down. I just think we have to be smarter about the way we do things. And if I could push that a little bit from time to time, let's be pragmatic and smart. We can hold on to our values and be welcoming and open. But let's be smart about how it practically. This is my anthropology hat, study anthropology. It's people want to be around people like them.
Sure.
Some of the time, not all the time. So anyway, but I just wanted to.
There's also a in the business world there is a sentiment that once a business is larger than 50 people, that you've moved into a different kind of realm. So if you were the founder of a business, and the only reason I know this is that I was involved with one of the big corporations at one point doing consulting work, and once you're past that number and it starts getting bigger, the person who founded the organization sometimes can't deal with the different dynamics that exist the bigger you get.
Interesting.
And that's the number. The magic number is 50. So the question that I have is, can we start looking at ways to break things down into smaller, less centralized in Boston and decentralized in regions where your district, even though we're not all homogenous, we've got some things that are at least related to one another and we're familiar with the same streets and that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Are there ways to start to break that down? And when you start looking at that, then what happens? What can you put together? Without creating another layer of government? I'm not suggesting we start.
No, but I like that. Well, and that does two things. It decentralizes, and so you get more local circumstances to deal with. And then it also speaks to collaboration. We're relying on lines that were drawn over 300 years ago. It would take all day to get, now. So why aren't we? And there's some of that. I know we're doing some of it here in Holliston, which is great, but we could think more about it. No, I think those are the kinds of things we're going to have to think about in the years ahead. So we'll see.
Times are always changing. Well, it's really been great to see you, James. I'm glad everything's going so well, and I'm very much impressed with your level of energy. Level of energy, go, go,
That's
go.
always, yeah, that's kind of the way it is. But I appreciate that. And thank you for the opportunity.
Sure, and we'll see you in the next
Yeah,
quarter.
no, I'll
and
look forward to
keep me-
coming back every quarter and
Yeah.
kind of keeping up to date with what's going on and sharing what I'm learning and what I'm hoping to accomplish in the years ahead, and along with others in the legislature. So thanks again for the
Okay,
opportunity.
and good luck for the next few months. All right, folks, that will be a wrap for now, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks so much.